likely already scripted out. It just remained to be seen how far they would push before the end. Or what unforeseen agent of chaos intervened and changed the entire flow of events. I like that, agent of chaos, I thought, folding up the parchment and stowing it away again. My thoughts returned to our community. We had to bring in farmers, cultivate fields and crops, establish a trade route, and not to mention secure crystals and other ingredients. This whole endeavor would be for nothing if we couldn't find a way to cultivate additional strength along the way. The idea of crystals simply spurred on more thoughts. Crafting materials, ingredients for elixirs and pills, and ore for weapons. The list continued to build in my mind until I couldn't keep my legs still. That was it. I knew I'd never get back to sleep. I had to get moving and do something productive. Something much more important than sleeping next to two gorgeous women. I sighed as I carefully wiggled out from under Sirius's limbs and then picked my way around the bedrolls covering the floor. We'd left a solitary candle burning in the next room, but the wind whipping through the open window frames had blown it out. No bother. I pushed forth a bit of mana, wove it into a thread, and connected the two ends, creating a glowing wisp. It gave off more than enough light. Pushing the wisp into the air above me, I pulled on my boots, then lifted a heavy wool hanfu off a nail on the far wall. Only a month had passed since our raid on the mine, but the days had already started to grow shorter, and the nights noticeably longer and cooler. Pulling my heavy hanfu closed, I unlatched the large wooden door and stepped outside. Before the wind could rip it off its hinges, I closed it hurriedly behind me and stood there in the half-dark. The wind immediately buffeted me, a single, solitary sound rising above the lapping lake water and creaking trees. I turned to the left and then back around, my mana wisp shifting from my left shoulder before drifting to the right. A lull surrounded me as the wind died down momentarily, and the soft chorus of frogs filled the night. Then the wind came in again and hit the partially constructed inn behind me. It whistled between boards, buzzed against shutters, and rattled shingles. It sounded oddly similar to a distant wolf's howl, and I started to wonder if that was what I'd heard all along. Part of me wanted it to be the wolf, that it was some bit of supernatural confirmation, our sect's namesake welcoming us home. That is what I chose to believe anyway. Pushing forth into the darkness, I swung the wisp around until I found one of our wooden handcarts. I cleared it off and then carefully pushed it purposefully towards the forest ahead of me. I left the cluster of partially formed buildings behind, pushing the small cart faster once I was sure the noise wouldn't rouse anyone. If I was awake, it didn't necessarily mean that the girls had to get up as well. They had been pushing their weight, even more so than I had expected from them. Their hands had formed calluses, and they weren't even bothering as much with keeping up appearances, only smearing some thick eyeliner because they knew how much I loved it. It was a fairly short walk south, but my wisp faded before I reached the pit and its clearing in the trees. Forming another light, I set the cart by a nearby tree and inspected the area ahead to ensure nothing had changed since my last visit. I watched the ground, careful not to cross the line we'd carved into the earth. Once I'd stepped over that, the pit would come alive, and the first swarm would appear. The moon hovered high overhead as I stretched my neck, muscles releasing, and several joints popping. I stared up at the haloed clouds as the silvery light shone through. I opened the rift in my pendant and pulled forth my spear, then grabbed a few crystals for good measure and stuffed them into my interior robe's pocket. Lastly, I begrudgingly sloughed off the heavy wool hanfu and hung it on a low-hanging tree limb. The cool wind immediately cut through my light robes, but as badly as I wanted the heavier garment, I knew I couldn't afford the weight or the restriction to flexibility. It wouldn't matter shortly anyways, as I would warm once I started to move. Fighting for one's life tended to get the blood flowing. Along with the mana circulation, it would help me keep my temperature up without any problems. "Bring on the claws, and I'll give you hellfire," I whispered, twirled my spear before me,